After my trip, I came home to find my bags dumped outside and a note from my son saying, "No space for you anymore." I quietly went to my private apartment and halted the property transfer he didn't know I controlled. At the family meeting, I walked in with my lawyer, and the room fell silent. The first thing that struck me wasn't the sight of my life folded into cardboard boxes on the porch. It was the smell, Chloe's perfume, that cloying, expensive cloud of jasmine and ambition, soaked into the saltwater mist and clinging to my favorite armchair like a second skin. The chair had been dragged outside and left to ruin in the damp evening air, its velvet back swollen and dark with rain. Taped to it, pristine and white as a surrender flag, was an envelope. But it was the porcelain music box at my feet that truly stopped my heart. The one Arthur gave me on our first anniversary, the tiny ballerina now snapped clean at the waist, her painted mouth frozen in a silent scream that matched the one lodged in my throat. 6 words were scrawled on torn notebook paper in Chloe's elegant, looping script. We needed the space. It's done. No warning. No final fight. Just a quiet surgical erasure. I stood there on the cobblestones while the fog rolled in from the harbor and settled over Port Blossom like a shroud. In that moment, I understood something colder than betrayal. I had been replaced. My entire existence reduced to clutter, something to be set on the curb without ceremony. Have you ever come home and found the locks changed on your own life? 3 days earlier, the air had been still, thick with coming thunder. I'd driven down the coast to visit an old college friend, just a brief escape. Julian had hugged me beside the car, quick and perfunctory, the way you pat a dog you're fond of but no longer have time for. Chloe had smiled over his shoulder and promised to water the hydrangeas. I'd believed them both. Now the porch light was dead. The Grand Bay windows stared back like empty sockets. My battered leather suitcase sat beside plastic bins, everything labeled in Chloe's tidy block letters. On top lay the quilt I'd hand-stitched the year Julian was born, faded now, edges soft from 28 years of bedtime stories. Next to it, my brass reading lamp and 2 framed photographs. Arthur, forever 35 and laughing, and the 3 of us on Julian's first day of kindergarten, his small hand swallowed in mine. I waited for tears. They didn't come. Shock is a crystalline thing, too sharp for crying. I didn't knock on the door I still legally owned. There was nothing left to say. I lifted the suitcase, slid Arthur's unbroken photo inside, tucked the quilt beneath my arm, and walked away. My footsteps vanished into the fog. No curtain twitched, no one watched me go. The silence was worse than any screaming match we never had. At the corner where the gas lamps flickered on, I turned once. The house was only a bruised silhouette against a purple sky. I kept walking. That first night I slept, or didn't, on the bench overlooking the harbor, the one Julian and I refinished when he was 12. Salt crusted my lips, gulls cried overhead like mourners who'd arrived too late. I wasn't ready to call anyone. I didn't want pity. I wanted the soft, unweaponized silence of pre-dawn and the cold wooden slats under my spine reminding me I was still alive. Morning burned the mist away. I walked until I found myself in front of the new Marina townhouses, sleek glass boxes Julian and Chloe had talked about with shining eyes. Through floor-to-ceiling sheers I saw them. Julian standing, Chloe seated, heads bent over a glossy brochure for a kitchen remodel, quartz counters, restaurant-grade appliances, all the sterile perfection she craved. She laughed that bright, sharp laugh that never reached her eyes and stabbed the page with a manicured finger. Julian's shoulders folded inward. He lifted a coffee mug but didn't drink. For one terrifying second his gaze drifted to the window and I thought he saw me, a ghost in yesterday's clothes, but his eyes were unfocused, looking through me at nothing at all. Something inside me shifted then. The ice cracked. A slow, furious heat began to rise. All the small moments of the past year snapped into focus, like puzzle pieces I'd refused to assemble. Chloe helping with household accounts and quietly taking every password. Julian steering every conversation away from the future of the house. Legal-sized envelopes arriving addressed only to him, the flicker of guilt I'd mistaken for ordinary stress. I hadn't missed the signs. I had chosen blindness because the alternative was monstrous. I stood there until the curtain moved and I forced my heavy legs to carry me away. At the library, I plugged in my dead phone for no reason except motion. It buzzed alive. One missed call from Julian at 11:42 p.m. the night before. No voicemail, just a breadcrumb of performative concern. Eleanor? The voice anchored me like a lifeline. Isabel Rosie, my old colleague from the insurance firm, stood there in practical wool and sharp eyes. We hadn't spoken in years, but some friendships calcify into something stronger than time. She read my face the way she used to read fraudulent claims and steered me to a quiet corner. 10 minutes later, the whole story spilled out of me in a whisper. Isabel listened without flinching. Then she told me she'd run into Chloe at a networking event the week before. Chloe had gushed about renovations on the family home and exciting new developments, hinting the property might soon be on the market. Isabel had assumed I was happily downsizing. Something's wrong, isn't it? I could only nod. She asked if I had clear title. I thought so. Arthur and I had been meticulous, but sudden doubt tasted metallic on my tongue. Isabel told me about a case she'd consulted on. A son-in-law with power of attorney who forged documents, moved his mother-in-law to a dismal facility, and flipped her house in 29 days. The blood left my face. Chloe handling utilities. Julian forgetting to give me the tax notice. The checkbook vanishing last spring. Not accidents. Brushstrokes. That afternoon, I rented a P.O. box, my name, my control, a metal drawer no one could empty without my key. A ridiculous thing to feel proud of, but I did. Evening found me at the old loft above Harbor Bookstore. I hadn't been there in 5 years, yet the key still turned with the familiar groan of swollen wood. Dust motes danced in the salt-stained light. The air smelled of lemon oil and old paper and grief I thought I'd finished processing. In the locked filing cabinet, I found the original deed, the title, our co-ownership agreement, everything solely in my name. Julian's name appeared nowhere. Arthur and I had wanted him to build his own life, not inherit ours like a trust fund prince. Then I found the utility bills I'd brought up years ago for safekeeping. Every single one had been switched to Chloe's name, my name erased, and clipped to the top envelope, a transfer request bearing a forgery of my signature so clumsy it was almost insulting. I did not cry. I did not scream. A cold, clean clarity settled over me like armor. I placed the real documents and the forgery in the fireproof safe, locked it, and pocketed the key. They thought I was out in the cold. They had no idea what I still held. The next morning I spread everything across Isabel's coffee table. Her mouth tightened as she read. This is groundwork for a forced sale, Eleanor. They're building a narrative that you're incompetent, that they're managing your affairs. They think you won't fight. She made one phone call. By noon, I was climbing the steps of a restored captain's house where Silas Croft, semi-retired estate attorney with silver hair and predator eyes, waited. He read slowly, absolutely. When he finished, he folded his hands. You are the sole legal owner. Full stop. Everything else is noise until they try to leverage it. Then it becomes fraud. He laid out a quiet fortress, cease and desist letters, county clerk flags, protective memoranda with the real estate board. Brick by brick, no theatrics. I signed with a hand that no longer trembled. That afternoon, couriers delivered sealed envelopes to Julian's investment firm and Chloe's wellness spa. I sent no accompanying message. Silence can be a blade too. Julian called 5 times. I let it ring. Chloe texted, "You didn't have to do this." Hours later, I replied with 6 words of my own. Every action has a consequence. The next morning, I walked past the house. Every blind was drawn tight, as though the windows themselves were ashamed. Julian showed up at the loft that evening looking smaller than I remembered. He claimed he hadn't known about the forgeries, that Chloe thought I was getting frail, that it was never supposed to go this far. Lies stacked on half-truths until they collapsed under their own weight. When I asked why he hadn't stopped her, he stared at the floor and muttered, "I didn't want the conflict. It felt easier to let her handle it. I didn't think you'd push back." He hadn't chosen her over me. He had chosen comfort over character, and that was worse. I closed the door on him with no slam, only the soft click of finality. They tested the walls again a few days later, an inquiry from a realtor requesting pre-sale documents. Silas shut it down before lunch. Julian returned on a Sunday, pleading that Chloe was scared I'd go public. I looked him in the eye. "You knew, Julian. You've always known. And you let it happen because it benefited you." He didn't argue. He simply said standing between us was impossible. I thanked him for the honesty and closed the door a second time. Some doors, once closed, stay that way. The final blow came a week later. Proof Julian had opened a joint online profile in my name and applied for a home equity line of credit using the forged bills and a scanned copy of my old license. Wire fraud, Silas said, already filing complaints and freezing every account tied to my identity. Then came the text. We're having a family discussion Saturday. Time to clear the air. Silas accompanied me. The living room was staged for reconciliation. Candles, cheese board, cushions plumped like nothing was wrong. Chloe opened with practiced warmth. This is still your home, too. Silas placed the bound, cease and desist on the table. Actually, the home belongs solely to my client, Eleanor Vance. Any representation otherwise has been challenged. We are also aware of forged documents submitted to financial institutions. Those matters have been reported. I stood. My voice did not shake. You tried to write me out of my own life. You thought I wouldn't notice. I walked out. Silas paused at the threshold. Further interference will trigger immediate litigation. The next morning, I entered the house one last time. They were in the kitchen, silent. I'm selling, I said. Julian's lips parted. But where will you? That is no longer your concern. I placed the signed listing agreement on the table. The proceeds are going into a trust, a foundation for women over 60 who have been manipulated, discarded, or erased by their own families. Legal support, housing, dignity. Isabel will run it. Silas will oversee compliance. I didn't wait for protests. I stepped outside, closed the door gently, and walked into morning light that felt like forgiveness. That afternoon, I sent the press release. The foundation launched the following week. My new apartment is small, but the windows face east, and the light pours in like it has nowhere else to be. I write in the mornings. I walk the harbor in the afternoons. One day I found the old graduation photo someone had trimmed my face from with manicure scissors. I placed the mutilated image in a small wooden box and closed the lid. Not with bitterness, but with recognition. People think healing is loud. Sometimes it's only breath, quiet, steady, persistent. I never erased them from my memory. I simply stopped centering my life around people who had edited me out of theirs. This spring I planted lavender on the windowsill. It grows crooked and stubborn, leaning toward whatever light it can find. But it bloomed. That has been enough. If this story settled anywhere inside you, thank you for listening. So many of us endure years of silence before we finally choose ourselves. Have you ever felt erased, not shouted down, but quietly edited out of rooms you built? Your story has weight, and sometimes in the telling, we begin to bloom again, quietly, steadily, in our own light.